In this video, I want to give you 3 good examples of the maxim that you can be penny wise and pound foolish, or vice versa, whatever it is, pound foolish and penny wise. Basically, I've seen many situations where people have refused to spend a few bob to get professional advice, and it's cost them dearly. And in this video, I want to give you 3 examples. The first one is a situation where somebody has come to me, and this happens quite a lot, comes to me and says they want a legal agreement, they want an agreement. They are entering into perhaps leasing a premises, either as landlord or as a tenant or as a subleasee or something, and they're looking for an agreement, but they want something simple. They want a one-pager, and they don't want anything too legalese, and they want to avoid basically the cost associated with getting a solicitor to draft an agreement properly. And that's fine until the crap hits the fan. And when the crap hits the fan, I'll tell you what happens. The person who comes to me and the other person, the person with whom they have the agreement, they both have a contract now. They both have an agreement, and they've got this one-pager. And they both then rush to the one-pager because there's a dispute, a serious dispute between them. For example, was VAT payable on the rent? For example, was the lessee to pay rates, or were they included in the rent? Was there a break clause? How long was the agreement to go on for? The bottom line is both of them will rush back to the agreement. They'll have a look at it. They'll say, oh my God, and then they'll get a solicitor. Then the 2 solicitors are going to look at the agreement. And what you're left with then is this one-page agreement, which initially the purpose was to make life simple for you, and you were doing it on the basis that, on the assumption that there wasn't going to be any huge disputes or anything, and now the crap's hit the fan. In a situation like this, you could have, for example, gone into a shop, taken on a shop unit, done a really good job, and end up getting turfed out after 12 months or 18 months or whatever, even though you've built up a great business in it. And you cannot rely on your one-page agreement because it simply doesn't provide you with enough protection. On the other hand, you could find yourself stuck in a lease that you can't get out of. There's no break clause, and you're stuck with a lease for 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 years. You must pay the rent on it, and whether the business is going badly or going really well, it doesn't make any difference. If you signed up to an agreement to pay rent for 25 or 35 years, then you must pay the rent, because it's breach of contract otherwise, and you can be sued for it. So that's the first example of the situation where people want to save money, don't want to pay solicitors, don't want a big expenditure, want something simple, want the one-page agreement. And as I say, it can go badly pear-shaped. The second circumstance which I've seen is where people will approach me for legal advice in relation to an employment problem. There may be an employer or there may be an employee. A lot of the time it's an employee. They basically will want an assessment of their situation, whether they have a claim essentially or not. Perhaps a claim for unfair dismissal or breach of contract or bullying or harassment or whatever. Now, in order for me to advise them properly, I need to look at their contract of employment. I need to look at all the surrounding circumstances. I need to get more information. I need to review the relevant correspondence, perhaps between the employer and employee, and have a look at the whole situation and then advise. And in order to do that, I charge a small consultation fee. And some people don't want to pay the consultation fee, and that's fine. But the bottom line is, for the sake of, approximately €100 or €95 or €99 or whatever I might charge for a one-off consultation review, for the sake of that, they could be walking away from a decent unfair dismissal claim, or a decent claim for breach of contract, or a decent claim for some fundamental breach of their employment rights. Again, it's another instance that I would see of being penny wise and pound foolish. The third situation arises not in relation to paying a solicitor, but in relation to paying another professional. That is, when you're buying a property, a residential property, or indeed a commercial property, any property, I would always recommend that you get a structural survey carried out by an engineer or a surveyor or an architect. The reason for that is because the maxim of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, applies to the purchase of all second-hand property. In other words, you must carry out your due diligence, carry out your inquiries beforehand, because afterwards it's too late. Second-hand property is precisely that. It's second-hand. You get the chance to carry out an inspection. You get the chance to make all the bloody inquiries that you like before you purchase it. But once you do, that's it. Now, the specific advice that I give is to get a structural survey carried out. And some people say, how much does that cost? And I said, well, look, I think it's 300 quid, maybe 400 quid. It depends on the surveyor or architect. And some people, believe it or believe it not, actually don't want to pay that and won't pay that. A few people won't. Ordinarily people will, or the majority of people will, but some people won't, and it's a very, very serious mistake, I think, to make. Because for the sake of 300 quid, you could end up buying a property for 300,000. You have a mortgage of maybe 250. You're stuck with it for 30 years, and then you discover that the house or the property, the shop or whatever it is riddled with maybe pyrite or perhaps some other structural problem that's going to cause you huge problems and make it practically unsaleable. So from day one, you're looking at a massive turkey of an investment, all for the sake of not forking out the 300 quid or 400 quid for a structural survey to some surveyor who has insurance, who will tell you, carry out a proper inspection, a proper analysis of the property, and tell you whether it is structurally sound or not. So they are the three situations that I come across quite regularly in relation to people being foolish in relation to not spending a few bob initially to see exactly where they stand or to make a sound investment. As I say, you can be penny wise and pound foolish, and in the long run it could come back to bite you. So my advice is to get professional advice, whether it's a solicitor, whether it's an architect, whether it is a doctor, whether it's a consultant in relation to perhaps a personal injury claim or whatever. But don't be penny wise and pound foolish. That's been my experience. I do come across people, the vast majority of people are sensible, but there is a minority of people who, really do rush into silly decisions, all for the sake of cutting corners and not spending a few bob at the outset to carry out their due diligence. I'm Terry Gorry. I hope you find this useful. You might give it the thumbs up down below and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you do find it useful.